Okay, Steve, how are you?
Fabulous. Well, the reason I left IBM is because the technical things and me don't go together. So,
Me too.
yeah, maybe it's my fault, Gremlins. I don't know.
Okay, before my mic falls off. So
They
it's
follow me
been
around.
it's been really, really interesting, isn't it? Like just trying to figure out the entire Zoom thing. I am
Yes,
going to keep checking my phone only to make sure that we are actually live. We tried going live earlier and we didn't think we were live, but we actually were. And we were not able to tell that we were live because there is usually a delay between the live stream and the Zoom. So, yeah. Anyway, let's just have a conversation. But, it's really interesting because I think you and I, we've talked for so long and we said that we will do this together, but we hadn't done it for a long time. And
yeah,
I'm really glad that finally the time aligned for us to have this conversation.
me too. Me too. We got there in the end.
Yes, it's been a while. And the several times we talked, we just kind of thought that we were having some really intense, deep conversations that I think could highly benefit people who join this either live or people who finally catch up with the recording. But a lot of the things that I think you and I are passionate about, I know that you focus more on mindfulness, and am very passionate about mindset, and of course, helping women scale their businesses. But ultimately, it all starts with us ensuring that we come from a place where we're aligned. And when we're aligned, we are not stressed. We are able to create a very fulfilling, purposeful life, and everything comes from there: success, happiness, fulfillment, everything. So, yeah,
And I think it was a nice metaphor that we had such horrendous technical challenges, right? Because nothing's easy,
yeah,
and you're going to be tested a lot all the time.
such a good point.
So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, such a
Does it
good
completely
question.
throw you or not?
Yeah, earlier when I was trying to sort of all the technology, I don't know if you feel this, but I go through this a lot. When you are so invested in growth and developing as a person, I don't know if you ever sense that there is always your like past self around. I always am able to detect my past self, not in a bad way, but it's almost like look back at who I was and I'm grateful for where I am. So for
Hmm.
example, with all these technical challenges that we were having, I could almost hear what my past self would have said, like, oh my God, I would have panicked on a million things. And
Hmm.
as much as I was trying to figure things out, my heart and my mind was like, you know what? If it's meant to be, it'll happen now. If it's not,
Hmm.
it'll happen later. But the important thing is to keep calm and keep your cool, because by you being worked up, you're not going to be able to help the situation anyway. In fact, if anything, you'd have a mental block. So it's better
Right.
to be calm and collected and just look at the step by step and see how we can actually go live.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect example because for me, kind of this all stems back to the relationship we have with our minds and with the
Yeah,
thoughts that run through our minds
yeah,
and how we respond and react to those things.
yeah,
And if you're somebody who's so swept up in the thoughts and the emotions and something like this, a technical challenge happens and you're just without even knowing it, you're just pulled away and your blood
yeah,
pressure goes through the roof and you're snapping at everyone, you're shouting at everyone, and let's fix it and rah, rah, rah. That's a fundamental difference between having just enough self-awareness to watch what you describe as the old you, right?
yeah,
Because some of these conditioned patterns and habits, these thoughts have been run through our minds for decades sometimes.
yeah,
So they don't just naturally go away. We got to change our relationship to our mind. We've got to be the watcher of these thoughts, the observer of our mind
yeah,
and the emotions. And then you become more powerful because then you can still see that old conditioned you, right? That's getting stressed and snapping and what are we going to do and blah, blah, blah. But you don't need to take that path anymore.
yeah,
Then a new pathway opens up where, okay,
yeah,
here's what's happening in this moment. What's going to be best for me? What's physiologically going to be best for me? For a start, blood pressure high, cortisol levels high, all this kind of stuff, or maybe a calmer, clearer mind.
yeah,
Because you're right. At the end of the day, this live stream is either happening now or it's not.
yeah,
People will either get to see this conversation or they won't.
Yeah.
And whether you and
And
I, like,
even if they don't get to hear it now, they'll get to hear it later, which we can
yeah,
continue to
yeah,
plan.
yeah,
I'm just looking
yeah,
again at my LinkedIn to make sure, but it does say we are live, so I'm really hoping that we are live. Um, yeah, I can't see
all
it.
the best live demos go wrong. It makes me
Yeah,
think of back at IBM and Microsoft and Apple doing all their live events and networks going down and demos failing. And
yeah, I can't see it, but I'm pretty sure we're live because it says we are live.
okay,
Yeah, but you said a couple of things earlier about, first being the observer, and second, you talked about something not being physiologically good for you. I wanted to pick up there. First is about being the observer of the mind. You know, at first, I would say more than 40 years of my life, I used to wake up in the morning and my how I felt about the day was dictated by how I felt when I woke up. And I think like I would say that more than 90% of people in the world still think like that, where you wake up in the morning and maybe you're not aware of it because subconsciously maybe something happened yesterday, or you had a bad dream, or you didn't sleep well, or whatever the case may be. You could have woken up in the morning in a completely horrible mood, and you will allow that to carry through your entire day. And I never ever knew that I get to choose how I feel, that I have the power to switch how I feel. A lot of people are not aware of it. All you need is one thing going wrong, and that's where the term come from, waking up from the wrong side of the bed, right? Like you
yeah,
wake up from the wrong side of the bed means everything that day goes wrong, which is not necessarily the case, because if you are aware of the fact that you are creator, everything that happens to you is has a lot to do with the energy that you put out into this world. And if you are the creator, then you get to choose how that wrong side of the bed becomes the right side of the bed without you even realizing it. That's one. And second, related to it is what you said about physiologically, when we are stressed, our blood pressure goes up and all sorts of things happen to us only because we are stressed. Using that specific example, another thing I think people are not aware of is if you don't feel like you're in a good state, you can change your state physiologically.
mm,
And by you changing your state physiologically, you are able to change the way you feel. So sometimes if I feel very stressed, or if I feel like, something has caught me off guard and I'm not in a good place, I suddenly become aware. Because when you are used to working on yourself, you just automatically can tell when you're feeling good. And when you're feeling good, your heart is open. And when your heart is open, you feel aligned, versus when you're not feeling good. When you're not feeling good, you automatically feel your heart contracting, your breath becoming shorter, and you realize this is not home. This is not where I usually live. This is not where I like to be. And so when something like that happens to me, I ask myself, hey, you could actually do something. What are you going to do now? And sometimes all it takes is just me putting on some nice music. I like the song Happy. I forgot the name of the artist. I put the song Happy, and sometimes I just dance for 5 minutes, and literally it can shift my mood. I think a lot of people are not aware of the fact that using your body, you can actually switch the way you feel.
yeah. So let's unpack that then, because some people, I'm probably going to play the cynic in this call as well,
Sure.
Mina, because I am a cynic.
Sure.
So to break it down of two things when you were saying that. First thing I thought reminded me of Dr. Amisha Jar's work at the University of Miami.
Right.
So if anybody doesn't know her, she's written a great book called Peak Mind, right? And her mission, forget mindfulness, forget meditation. In fact, she was put off meditation as a young girl, even though meditation was in her family. I think it was because her dad said it was for men or for boys and not really something women should do or something like that. But anyway, there's a story that really turned her off at a young age. Anyway, as a neuroscientist, she was really keen to find out what made up a peak mind, right? And what does she mean by peak mind? She's working with people like first responders, she's working with military personnel, people who, if they make the wrong decision, literally one or many
Mm.
lives are lost, right? Massive decisions, bigger decisions than most people will make. And she was curious, why do people have access to the right part of their memory in a very stressful situation? And why do some people genuinely forget? An
Mm.
example she gave was a guy with a GPS. It was one of the worst friendly fire incidents in recent memory. I think it was in Afghanistan. This guy's got a GPS and he knows. So he's put the coordinates in to drop a bomb on the enemy. Let's not get into the merits or otherwise of war today, but so he's there to drop a bomb, and he sees the battery low signal come up on the GPS. He knows he has to change the batteries, right? He also knows, because he's been trained 1,000 times, and because he's done it 1,000 times, that when you replace the batteries in this GPS, it resets all the coordinates. He knows that. But he's under so much pressure in this war situation, and he's about to program this bomb to go. He changes the batteries and he forgets. He literally loses part of that, the access to the part of his brain that has that fact in there. And he presses the button, and the coordinates have been reset, and he drops it on his own people. And it was a massive friendly fight. So let's take away. We're not going to get political today or anything like that. But let's just zoom in on that as a specific example. She was curious to say, okay, let's translate that to business. Let's translate that to somebody making multi-million-dollar decisions at work, or even somebody making a decision in their own business where that could cause them to fail or succeed and thrive or not. What gives people access to the parts of the brain they need when the pressure is on, when real pressure's on? And of course, the answer she got from Professor Richard Davidson and other people in the US was mindfulness. And she hated that answer. She actually didn't like that answer because she's like, oh God, can you tell me something? I was hoping it was something else. But she describes it as brain training. I don't particularly like that label for mindfulness, but that's just an interesting background that even if you go down this route, right? Forget any spiritual stuff, forget any woo-woo stuff, forget any tree hugging, right? If you go down the hard science route of what's the number one brain training that's going to give you reliable access to what you need when the stuff is hitting the fan, mindfulness. These guys will tell you. And this is why they train these people. That was the first thing I thought that came up, which is fascinating to me. As a kind of, I was going to say a former cynic. I'm still a cynic in many ways, Mina, right? I think a healthy skepticism for all this stuff
Yeah, I agree.
is really good.
I agree.
But you talked about getting out the wrong side of the bed and making that the right side of the bed. Talk me through that exactly, right? Because some people, if I'm the cynic in me, I'm thinking, all right, well, if I wake up, let's say I had a terrible day at work and a really rough night's sleep. Let's say I had a terrible night's sleep. My mind kept me awake. I've got no way switching my mind off, let's say. It's the middle of the night, my mind's racing, I'm worrying about stuff. And I know I shouldn't be worrying about it, right? Because I know there's nothing to do. It doesn't stop me. And I get more and more wound up and I get more and more frustrated. And I toss and turn in bed and I look at the clock and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I may as well get up now. Screw this. And I get up and I'm sleep deprived and I'm angry that I haven't slept and I'm probably anxious. And now, how can I magically switch from that to cartwheeling down the road and everything's unicorns and rainbows?
I think there is more than one way. Ultimately, it gets to the same place, but there is more than one way. And I usually try different approaches. So if you are in that state, which you said, where you have had a stressful night, you're worrying and it's not going to help, and yet you're worrying, and then you are still having one problem after the other simply because you're sleep deprived. The question I usually ask myself is this how I want to feel? What we forget is that we look at our dreams and our goals as something that is happening in the future. We say, I'm going to be happy when I achieve that, right? I'm happy when that. But if you look at the entire cycle of our life, it is ridiculous. Think about it. When you're born and you grow up, you obviously don't know much, but you cry, you're a baby, and then you learn how to walk. After you learn how to walk, then you learn how to, first you walk assisted, then you walk without assistance, you run. After you run, then you have the awareness and you are like, you look at adults and you say, I wish I was an adult, because when you're a child, you're told you got to sleep on time. I felt that when I was a child. You have to sleep on time. Like, I wish I was an adult. Nobody would tell me what I need to do, right? Whereas the adult looks at the child and says, I wish I was a child. And then you become an adult, and then you are like, okay, this really sucks. I'm in school. I'm being controlled by my parents. I can't wait until I'm in university. I have freedom. When I'm in university, you're like, damn it, I have this pressure of like, getting a job, and it's I'm competing with everybody else for my grades. And then you also feel like, am I good enough? Because your friends are dating other people and you don't feel you're good enough. And you're like, when am I going to find somebody? Right. And when you find somebody, everybody else is getting married. And you're like, when am I going to get married? And then when you get married, everyone's having kids. When am I going to have kids? When am I going to have the next job? When am I going to have, a promotion? We don't realize that, every single time we are caught in this entire chase of where we want to get to in our life, only to get to the last day or the end stage of our life and say, damn, is this it? Is this it? And so I kind of like thought about life simply put this way. A lot of us say we want to have a happy life, right? Let's unpack what is happy, what is life. What is life? Let's say life consists of 80 years, right? Those 80 years consist of 80 years. That means every single year counts in that 80 years. 1 year is 365 days. And if I spend every single day being happy right here, right now, those days compounded together is a happy life. Instead of me waiting for that ultimate goal to be able to get there and then being happy, because trust me, when you get to that goal, because I like to read about successful people, people who have accomplished things in their life, people who are close to the end of their life, the one thing they always say is, I wish I did something. I wish I worried less. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I forgave. So never assume you're going to get to the end of your life and say, I got here and now I'm happy. No, you're going to get there, and trust me, you're going to have regrets, because that's just how your mind works. So rather than waiting to get to that time, why not, while you're here, right now, focus on how you feel. Happiness is not dependent on what you achieve on the outside. Happiness is dependent on how you feel. When you learn how to align yourself, your heart and your mind, you are happy. And so going back to your question about what would I do, the first thing I start with is a question. How do I want to feel? And when I realize that I'm worrying about something and I'm going to rabbit hole, one thing I usually do, Steve, I say it out loud. You are stuck in a story. You are stuck in a story. This is a story. Create an empowering story, because that's a disempowering story. In that story, I'm a victim. I want to create a story where I am the creator. If I was the creator, how would my story pan out? I recently wrote a post about trying to find a trainer in the gym, right? So I wanted to hire a trainer, and I called my trainer who used to train me, and he was one of the best trainers I ever had. And so I said to myself, he is really good. He's going to get me to my goal. And because I'm so busy, I really don't have the time and capacity to look for trainers. And so in my mind, I only have one choice. So I called him and I said, hey, do you remember me? I want to train with you. And then we talked about the times. And I said, I want to train in the morning. He said, sorry, ma'am, I'm fully booked, fully booked. When we talked about like specific days, he said, I'm fully booked. And so I hung up, and for me, the options were closed. And I think we do this very often. Options were closed. There were no options. So I didn't see any options in my mind. I'm like, damn, it didn't work out, and this and that, and it's never going to happen and stuff. And that's when I caught myself. I said, this is a story. In this story, you're the victim. How can you be in a story where you are the creator? So I said, okay, if you trust in, the universe, and you trust that everything works out in my favor, then using that trust and belief, I should be more of the creator rather than the victim, right? And so I said, okay, let me now make a mental note. When I go to the gym, I'm going to ask for a better I'm going to ask for a good trainer. So it turns out, as I walked past the counter, I asked the receptionist, who is the best trainer you have? And he was standing right next to her, and he had been awarded the best trainer that year and the year before. And so I didn't even know anything about this. We had a conversation, and I said to him, I want to have a trial session. He said, of course. And in one session, he asked me whether I had any injuries and stuff. I told him a little bit. I said I had a little bit of a knee issue. And he's like, oh yeah, we need to do this. Steve, within 2 minutes, he got rid of the pain I had in my knee for years. And then going up and down the stairs didn't hurt anymore. And then I thought to myself, of course, I signed up for 50 sessions. And that's when I really thought to myself, what would have happened if I stuck to that story? I would have been
Okay.
unhappy.
So let me interrupt you there. So what we're saying here is that we're presupposing that you have enough self-awareness to see that that's a story in your head.
Yeah.
This is a fundamental thing, right?
Yeah.
Because before you can see that as a story that's running through your mind, that maybe you first came out with as a kid, or maybe your parents told you, or maybe everybody around told you, and you internalized it as a truth, and that's the gramophone record that plays on repeat, right? And this is what batters our resilience down. This is the
Yeah.
difference between somebody who can get knocked back in business and keep going, and get knocked back and think, I'm a failure. I knew it. I knew it was all going to
Yeah.
go wrong.
Yeah.
They told me it wouldn't work. So fundamentally, let's drill all the way back down, right? Fundamentally, you have enough self-awareness, which is something you practice, and we can get on to ways of practicing that in a second.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, you've practiced the art of being able to observe the thoughts and the emotions that are running through you at any given moment. And if these thoughts are futile and or unhelpful and or the victim story, I think is what you used, at that point you then go, okay, I see you now.
Mm.
I see you. I see you running through my mind. You're not me. That's a radical shift. Because guess what? Before they were you, and the thoughts would pick you up and take you over the hell they wanted, and you were swept away with all the emotion that went with it, with all the actions that came along with it as impulses, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So if we pull it all the way back, the first thing we're saying here is that, Mina, you have enough self-awareness to say, okay, maybe I slept badly, maybe yesterday was crap. People have crap days, let's be honest. You've got enough self-awareness to say, okay, what's the story running through my head now?
Mm.
And is it true? And
Mm.
can I challenge that?
Mm.
Do I absolutely, one of my favorite questions from Byron Katie, great teacher. She'll say to you, if you're having negative thoughts, especially negative thoughts, ask yourself the question, do I absolutely know it to be true?
Mm.
You've got to have the word absolutely in there.
Mm.
If you say, do I know it to be true? The mind will say, of course it is true. Everything I think is true.
Mm.
So you've got to challenge that and say, do I absolutely know it to be true? And at that point, you can then go, oh, okay.
Mm.
Well, my mind's telling me that today's going to be a terrible day because I had a terrible night's sleep and yesterday was terrible. That's the evidence.
Mm.
But do I absolutely know that to be true? No, you don't.
Mm.
Because it hasn't happened yet and you're in the present moment right now. And okay, so now what actions can I take to maybe go on a different trajectory, right? That was my predetermined path according to my mind. Maybe I do have an option.
Yeah.
And all this stuff boils down, this self-awareness, this emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, this all feeds into grit and resilience for me.
I want to
Because
take that exact thing that you said, but in a different context. Instead of us, because we're talking about happiness, right? Since this session is about self-confidence, using that
yeah,
exact same framework that you're talking about, it's the same thing with self-confidence,
yes,
right? Because
yeah,
you have a story in your mind that I'm
yeah,
not confident. You have a story in your
absolutely.
mind that these are the truths other people projected on you.
Yeah.
And this is the truth because of a past mistake or a past failure that you had. And we tend to label ourselves based on those projections and those failures, that
Yeah.
I'm not good enough and that I'm not smart enough, I don't have what it takes to succeed. And we then accept that to be the absolute truth. And because
Mm-hmm.
that's the absolute truth, you assume that you're not confident. And because you're not confident, you can't achieve X, Y, and Z. So if we were to use what you said earlier about, can I accept that to be absolutely the truth? Because if you failed at something before, how is it a truth about something in the future?
Yeah.
And if we take enough time to read about every successful person in the world, we know that every successful person in the world are able to achieve that level of success because they have a bigger appetite for failure. This is one thing that a lot of people are not aware of. They have an appetite for failure. The difference between them and those who don't succeed is that they think failure is an event. They just look at it objectively and they're like, okay, that didn't work out. What did I learn from this? And how do I now pivot or use different strategies and improve the previous strategies? And maybe this time it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
But people are not successful. Their ego is dented when they fail and they take failure as an identity. I am a failure. And because I failed, then you come up with all the conclusions as to what's not
Yeah.
possible for you.
I love the phrase, and I screenshot it on my phone. I just saw it flicking through my camera the other day. The screenshot that said, "Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo."
Like that.
And you're right. Like pick the world's greatest anything
Yeah.
basketball player, Michael Jordan, probably people would say, right?
Yeah.
This guy wasn't afraid to take the last shot because he knew he was going to miss some, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And he missed loads. He missed loads of game-winning shots, but he's still the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Whereas the other person would say the person that's have a strong fear of failure, which is me, by the way, not originally, my brain would say you could never be the greatest of all time if you fail that many times,
Yeah.
because the greatest of all time never fails. That's the
Mhm.
kind of illogical
Yeah. Not true.
mindset. That's the illogical thinking that your mind comes in. And this is why we've got to constantly be aware of and challenging and observing the thoughts that run through our mind, because
Yeah.
this is the thoughts that are going to be your own mind is going to be the thing that breaks you down the most.
Yeah.
Your own thoughts are going to be the things that convince you can't do this. Your own thoughts are going to be the ones that really reduce your resilience
Yeah.
and my experience kind of weaken you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You can have 100 people telling you you're fabulous, Minnie, you're amazing, you're so good. And that's kind of if underlying the voice in your head is saying, no, Minnie, you're rubbish, you're a fraud, you're going to get caught out, you've got imposter syndrome. Which voice are you going to believe? You're going to have 1,000 people
Your
telling you you're
own.
amazing,
Yeah.
right?
Your
So that's
own.
the one we got to tackle, right?
Yes. I want to check whether we are actually live. And I know we are, but just checking
Yeah.
because I'm not seeing.
No one's messaged me to say we're live, but
Yeah. But it says we're live, so I'm just assuming that we are. A little bit of a.
so how would you say? Because we're recording this, right? We can put this out
Yeah,
anyway.
we're recording
How
this.
would you how would you say your confidence has changed over the years? Would you say you're a confident child, or is
Oh,
some confident?
no, I wasn't. I wasn't. I'm really lucky that I like when you're going through something in life, at that time you're not aware of things, and then you look back and then you have a bit more of a hindsight. So
Yeah.
I kind of feel that was the same case in my life when I was a child. And I think we would all lie if we didn't admit the fact that we all come from dysfunctional backgrounds. I definitely came from a dysfunctional background. My parents moved to Indonesia. My parents are immigrants in Indonesia. I am, firstborn immigrant in Indonesia, but it's like second generation immigrant, right? And there were many things that I struggled with because, for example, I grew up being surrounded by a lot of Indians and Indonesians, but I never saw any differences. That's what I really love when we see a lot of these videos and we know that we learn from other videos that racism is taught. Why? Because as kids, you don't see yourself different from anybody. So I never
Mhm.
used to see myself different from other people, whether I'm surrounded by Indonesians or Indian. And these things were taught. So I used to get very confused. What am I? Because other Indonesians would perceive me very differently. My
Yeah.
Indian friends would not perceive me differently. But then when I was 16 and I went to boarding school and I went to university and I came back, I was perceived differently here. In the UK, I was perceived differently. So in the UK, I would always be asked, where are you from? And I lived there for 10 years. Where are you from? And I used to always say Indonesia. But when I came back to Indonesia, I kept getting asked, where are you from? And I had no idea where I was from because I'm saying from Indonesia, I don't even feel like I'm Indonesian. I don't even feel like I'm Indian because I never lived in India. Where the heck am I from? So I did
Yeah.
go through an identity crisis in my teen years. But even before that, as a child, and I think a lot of people know my story about growing up in an environment where I saw women were domesticated and I didn't look up to that kind of a lifestyle. I loved the women in my life, but I just didn't look up to the choices in my mind. It was a choice, the choices that they made, but only to realize that women's choices were limited, or more like, at least at that time while I was growing up, they didn't really have a choice. They were told this is exactly their life path. When they reach a certain age, they get married and that's it. But as a child, I never understood that because I looked at my aunts and my mom and I said, how in the world is this even possible? Why did God create me? He could not have created me to be controlled by my father until I'm 17. And then after I'm 17, be controlled by my husband. And then I die. Like, what a horrible reason to be coming to this world. So since I was a child, there was so many questions that I had that I don't think I had enough time to be thinking whether I was confident or not. I know I didn't feel confident around my very beautiful friends because I was slightly overweight, and a lot of the guys would want to talk to me to get to know my friends. It was like that. But I was very driven by a vision, always driven by a vision that I want to get out of this matrix that was designed for women. And I want to get out of this so that I can create my own life path. So if I were to look back, there was a lot that went through in my life. I did continuously question myself. I questioned about my own ability to succeed, my own ability to get an education, to pass in my exams, to be able to get a job, to be able to do anything, simply because coming from the background that I do, none of the women had done it. And so, if nobody had done it, there's a belief in my mind that there's no way I could have done it, but I still did it. I kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it, but I still didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the confidence, but I kept doing it and kept believing I wasn't good enough because I think there was a part of me that was always trying to fit in. It was almost subconsciously apologizing for standing out. It was only when I went through my financial loss that I felt I need to sit down and take stock of every reason why I got to where I got to. Not in terms of the loss, but in terms of the level of success I achieved, because I kept saying I wasn't good enough. And then I looked back and I said, why am I saying I'm not good enough? Because I was looking for evidence. It's interesting, isn't it? We tend to criticize ourselves. We think we're not good enough. We think we have imposter syndrome, and we are always focused on the evidence of why we're not good enough, but we never ever look at the reasons why we are. And that financial loss is the reason why I actually sat down and looked at how did I get here. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I actually qualified as a solicitor in the UK and an attorney in New York. I hate to say this, but I'm even more qualified than a white guy. And yet, because I'm a brown girl, I felt I was not good enough because society taught me that I wasn't good enough. And that is how my confidence changed, because I kept working on that level of confidence and the mindset. And because I looked for the right evidence, I was able to build up on that.
Hmm.
But I want to go to you as well, Steve, because you left IBM. Um,
Well, I
and
lost my job in IBM.
yeah,
Yeah.
how did that make you feel?
So, I mean, everything I say today comes with a huge dose of humility, right? I don't sit in front of you or anybody else watching this as pretending I'm this supremely confident, you know, ultra happy guy all day, every day. I'm a work in progress.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who has made massive strides and loves this and teaches this, but I certainly don't belong on any pedestal. But if I look at my own confidence, it's a really interesting one for me, right? So my story in a sentence is I joined IBM when I was a kid, and then 20 years later I burned out, and I needed something for the burnout. I was anxious beyond belief. My stress was terrible, just a horrible state to be in, and I needed
So how
something.
was, when you say your burnout and your stress was terrible, how did that affect you physically? Did you have
Sleep
any physical issues?
sleep was the first thing to go. My sleep went from brilliant to catastrophic, just awful. I realized I had zero control over the thoughts that ran through my mind. I had no way of stilling my mind, quietening my mind. Um, and no way of dialing down this anxiety. And I just was desperate to feel peaceful again. Desperate, desperate. So if I fast forward the story, I ended up trying mindfulness very reluctantly, very, very reluctantly, but I tried it, and it was revolutionary in minuscule ways to start with, just tiny little things. Just felt a little bit less anxious, a little bit better sleep, tiny things. It was enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I wanted to study this. I
Wow.
thought, did I just find water in a drought here, or am I kidding myself? So I looked at the science, I read the greatest teachers, I did, and I started devouring it. But here's the thing, right? Even though I knew mindfulness worked for me and had massively changed my life, and by this point, I was teaching fellow colleagues at IBM an 8-week course that I'd learned from University of Oxford. We partnered with them. This is the first and only corporate approved mindfulness program in the whole of IBM, right? Teaching people mindfulness, getting ridiculously good results. Don't take personal credit for that. I'm a facilitator of this program. These guys and girls do the work themselves. But people were saying things like, my blood pressure is normal for the first time in 10 years. I'm coming back to work early after being long-term sick. I've been that long-term sick because of this course. This has been life-changing for me and my family. I don't drink after work anymore. I'm listening to my wife again. Loads of really big things, right? But even then, Mina, I didn't have the confidence. I was so that the conditioned voices in my head, the conditioned patterns of thought in my head was so strong that you get a safe job, you join a big corporate, you get the healthcare, you get the pension, was so strong that I, even though I started to have this pull then to, well, do you know what? The greatest thing I did in IBM in almost 30 years was teach this course by a mile, by a country mile. Forget the technical achievements and the awards and by an absolute mile. And I knew that even then, but I didn't have the confidence to go into my boss's office and say, I'm resigning. I'm going to go and set up a business. I'm going to go and teach mindfulness in business.
Yeah,
I didn't have the guts to do that because the fear of failure was so strong. The fear of not being able to pay the bills was so strong. It was too much. There then came a day, and it's funny how life happens, right? Because there then came a day where my boss rang me up and there were no plans to make he or most of us redundant. And he told me that he was losing his job. I was losing my job. Most of the team were losing their job. So at that point, I then hit a proper crossroads, right? Because now the decision of staying in safe IBM had gone. I've lost my job, and I'll tell everybody how much money I got because that's also relevant. You talk about your finances. So for 28 years service, they gave me £12,000, which is a statutory minimum.
that's
Not a
crazy.
lot of money.
That's
Yeah, not a
crazy.
lot of money. So they didn't give me like 100. If they give me 80 or 100K, that's a different ballgame, right? You can chill out. You
Gosh,
can
that's
spend a
mad.
couple of years.
Yeah.
There's some very little money. We're in a pandemic as well. So at that point, that was probably the first ultimate test of my confidence, if you want to call it confidence, or maybe my ability to listen to my heart over my head would be another way of saying it. And my heart was screaming at me, go and teach mindfulness. You love this. You love helping people. If it works in IBM, it's going to work in other corporates, right? You don't know how to set up a business. You've never done it before, but you can figure all that stuff out
Mm,
because you've done the training, you've done the teaching,
mm,
and you know it works and you can
mm.
do it and you get enough good feedback that you're good at it. So I was quietly confident inside that I could do this thing. Externally, was I confident I knew how to set up a business and run with it and find clients and do the marketing and do the sales and do everything? Hell no. But that was interesting for me. If I reflect back, there was a very powerful confidence driven by my passion that for the first time in my life allowed me to listen to my heart over my head.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful thing when you do that, actually.
Yeah, just while you were saying that, I just thought of something, you said quiet confidence. And sometimes I think maybe we are looking for the wrong thing. Maybe we're looking for confidence the way the world teaches us to. But
Mm,
how about if we just focus on being aligned? That's it. Because if you're focused on being aligned, you're in a state of flow. And when you're in a
yeah,
state of flow, you will create. And you will not
yeah,
overthink things. You will not overthink things. You will just create, and that's it. Um, yeah, I think confidence is something that a lot of people think you need to have this quick fix and you have this standing position and when you stand a certain way and etc, all that works temporarily. And also the question I get asked is it important for you to first have the confidence, work on the confidence before you take action? I think one of the biggest lies we've been told is that you need to first be confident before you take action. Again, the truth
mm,
is take action and you will become confident.
mm,
And so rather than waiting for, something to drop on your lap, go and take action. If you don't know how to take action, read the book Atomic Habits because it's all about habit stacking. It's all about taking micro actions on a daily basis consistently. And over time, it will compound. It's the same thing with
mm,
success because most people compare themselves to others. You're on your page 1 or page 2 and you compare yourself with someone page 100. And we see this a lot online, isn't it? we're both creators, and every now and then you will read about somebody who's hit 100K followers. You'll read about somebody who's like achieved a certain milestone in their business. The past me would feel so disillusioned. I would feel so disillusioned. I would feel that their success meant I was a failure.
Mm.
They succeeded means I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So it comes from, firstly, a scarcity mindset that there is not enough room for everybody to succeed. And
Mm.
second thing, it also comes from a place of self judgment and thinking that everything is about quick hacks, everything is about, the secret sauce, everything is about like, the mini whatever one step thing that you have to do in order for you to achieve something. But the one thing we all are really bad at is just being patient, taking one step and seeing no result, taking one
Yeah.
step and seeing no result, taking one step and seeing no result, doing this consistently over and over and over and over
Yeah.
until you get to a point. And again, another lie, that when you get to a certain place, the world becomes a beautiful place. When you, let's say your goal is to be able to achieve 100K followers, right? Oh, when I reach 100K followers, I am on top of the moon. I will definitely be making six figures by then, which is not necessarily the case. You could be making six figures even 2,000 followers. But whether it is 10K, whether it is 100K followers, or whether it's 100K, dollars in your bank account, it is a lie. It's a complete misconception that when you get there, you are going to be in a state of bliss. That bliss will last all for 30 seconds, because after that, the inner critic will still step in. But you're not at the seven figures that your friend is at. You're not where somebody else is. But what will 100K buy me? All these thoughts will come back. The
Yeah.
question that you have to ask yourself on a daily basis is, how can I enjoy the process, trust the process, and continuously take action without overcomplicating things, without questioning myself too much, and understanding that ultimately life is not about the destination. Life consists of the journey, which is a longer portion of it.
Mm. And there are countless people. I mean, not to look far. If if these so-called destinations gave you ultimate fulfillment, right? If the $1 million in the bank, if the five houses around the world, if they were guaranteed to make you happy when you got them and forevermore, there'd be no rich people in rehab. There'd be no rich people with drug problems.
Very
There'd be no.
true. Very
Jim
true.
Carrey's a great example of this, right? Jim Carrey, he's a fascinating guy, and he's done his own kind of what he calls manifestation. This kind of
Yeah.
self-belief. He wrote himself a check for
Yeah.
$10 million, whatever it was, for a film, and then a number of years later, he earned that money. He literally got that check for Dumb and Dumber or one of the other films.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you look at younger people, we're so drawn into the future. It's very easy and normal in this day and age for young people. When I say young, I'm talking all the way up to probably 50, 60, to live permanently in the future, right? Because your life's not quite worked out yet. Life's still challenging me. There's still problems. It's still not quite perfect. But it's going to be perfect when? It's going to be perfect when I get that car. It's going to be perfect when I retire. I work with so many people at IBM, literally counting the days down. 4 years, 200 days, 3 hours, I'll be retired. It's like a ticking thing. That's when I'm going to be ultimately fulfilled. That's when I'm going to be able to go and play golf all day. I'm going to wake up happy every day. And if you spend the entire, massive parts of your life living in something that actually doesn't exist, which is the future, other than a concept in your head, then you're missing out a huge thing.
Yeah.
And the reverse is true, right? If we're in an old people's home now, most people would be very past centered. They'd be thinking, I should have done this when I was young. So they spend it because they got literally, they don't have much time left, right? If you get to 85, fact is you probably haven't got many years left. So where does your mind go then? Back to the
Yeah.
past. It can't go to the future. We run out.
Exactly. The same thing I
So
said
then it's
earlier. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the people, certainly the people that are at most peace in this world, and let's use the word content rather than happy, right? Because you could be content with but not everything being perfect around you. You could be content living in a trailer with very little money. And
Yeah,
the most content people, I think, are the people that live in the present moment,
exactly.
accept that present moment as it
Exactly.
is,
Exactly.
whether it's great or whether it's terrible.
Yeah.
And you can throw all in all the mantras of this too shall pass, all this clever stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think they're more aligned with the present moment
Yeah.
rather than living on a world that promises to fulfill you tomorrow. And if it's not tomorrow, it's the
Exactly.
next day. And
I wanna read you this quote that I saved. Um, I think it's such a beautiful quote. It just very much aligns with what you are talking about just now.
hmm,
It says, okay, I think I lost. I need to look for that quote. I kind of put up that quote, a quote every now and then, but I just
okay.
kind of
While
lost.
you're looking for that, let me tell you another quote I love.
Yeah,
Well, it's not even a
sure.
quote, but it's like a little story. So for
Sure.
people that think that tomorrow truly exists,
Yeah.
my kind of joke is that I'm going to open a bar in London. I'm going to open this beautiful big bar, right? And there's going to be a sign above it, and it's going to say free drinks tomorrow. And how many free drinks do I give away, Mina?
Sorry, what did you say about the drinks?
So I'm signing my bar. I'm going to have a posh bar in London, right? It's fully stacked,
Yeah.
Cristal champagne, whatever, the finest whiskies.
Yeah.
Above the bar, it says free drinks tomorrow.
Right.
And how many free drinks do I give away?
Well, as many as people show up.
None.
Why? Tomorrow,
You
because
come
it's
in,
tomorrow. Oh, it's because it's
come in.
tomorrow. Oh,
It's
I
tomorrow,
can't find
Mina.
it.
And you come back tomorrow, and I say it's
Yeah.
tomorrow, Mina. And you come back, and I say it's tomorrow, Mina.
Yeah, sorry, I can't find it. But when I find it, I will mention it. It was a beautiful quote about, forget about holding on to the idea of the life that you want and make way for the life that your consciousness is designing for you.
Wow.
Something to that effect. And I just thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
I mentioned this in one of my posts as well. My sister got married a few months ago and it changed my life because I used to be a workaholic and I used to just work all the time because I love what I do. But with her getting married, my 87-year-old mother suddenly became my responsibility. And I wasn't used to being very, I'm not a domestic person, so I wasn't used to being domestic in that way. There are days that I really struggle, really, really struggle because I cannot work as much as I want to. And it requires a different skill set, something that I never trained myself for, because I always used to be more of the, focused corporate stuff. But
Yeah.
taking care of the domestic stuff, taking care of my mom, and other skills that are required. And in my mind, I was resisting it so much, so much. And I kept saying, oh my God, why do I have to do this? Oh my God, I can only do 50% of what I want to do today and tomorrow. And I just kept struggling and struggling and struggling. And then I went back to what I said earlier, where I just kind of like stopped and said, am I feeling out of alignment? I am. I don't like how I feel. I don't like how I feel. And I started taking stock of what can I control. And I realized what I can control is the resistance that I was having. I'm having a lot of resistance. And then I thought, nothing in the world happens without God allowing it to happen, because I believe in God, without God allowing it to happen. So if I believe that God allowed it to happen or the universe has allowed it to happen, then if I could view this as something that is working in my favor, how would I change the way I think? How would I think the way I show up? And then I started realizing and saying, you know what, when my dad passed away, and I think this is a very normal, natural for anyone who's lost people they love. When you lose people you love, you will have a million and one regrets. I wish I spent more time. Even if you spend all the time in the world, you will wish that you had one more day. You will wish that you had one more hug, that one more kiss. You will wish that. And
Hmm.
so I said to myself, after losing my dad and knowing how I felt, why do I want to recreate that? So instead of saying, I can't work, oh my God, now I shift it every now and then. I shift it and I say, How many people are blessed enough to have an 87-year-old mother? How many people are blessed enough to be able to lie down next to her and hold her hand and have a conversation with her? you know and I do that very often, and almost every night actually. And so that has really helped me to stay in the present, very much in the present, and make way for what I think is important, because rather than me fighting what is not in my favor, because any resistance is not good, rather than me fighting what's not in my favor, how about using it to my advantage so that I can be fulfilled and happy, and at the same time not feel as if I'm constantly in resistance.
Yeah. So some really big lessons in there, right? So we
Huge.
pulled everything back to starting off with self-awareness, which kind of boosts our emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And then you've layered that now with accepting what is.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've layered it with gratitude.
Yeah.
Those are three pretty powerful things.
Very true. Very
When you're
true.
looking for grit and resilience, these things are huge, I think.
Huge.
And it's not, if the cynic, let me drag the cynic out of me again, because I always want to address the cynic in case there's someone watching this thinking, accept the present moment. Stupid idea. How could I possibly do that? What we're saying, I'm not saying accept the present moment and take no action. I'm not saying somebody comes up and punches you in the face and you go, well, Steve told me to accept the present moment. Bang, I got hit again. I'm just going to accept this because it is the present moment. It's happening right now. Bang, I'm being beaten up. No, what accepting the present moment is, surrendering to the present moment, whichever word you like. All that's saying is acknowledging that whatever's happening now is happening now. It's already happened, right? That's your starting point. It's like me running outside now, screaming at the sky and saying, why is it raining?
Yeah.
Well, it is raining. I can either accept that in this moment it's raining or it's not. Now, to not would just be crazy because it's here now, right?
And
So
know the
then you
difference
take,
between what you can control and what you can't. Know the difference.
yeah,
What you can't control, you have to accept.
right. And a lot of things we don't control, right? We
Yeah.
think because we've got insurance policies and
Yeah.
clever things that we think we're controlling our way through life, but not at all.
No.
We can't
No.
even control the voice in our head, let
Yeah.
alone anything.
I was telling my mom this the other day. I was saying that I believe the reason we die is because it's God's way of teaching us to let go. When we come into this world, we start accumulating things. We start accumulating experiences, relationships, physical, material belongings. But as we get older, we start losing the people we love. We have to start letting go, right?
Mm,
We start losing the life that we know. Physical and material things no longer satisfy you. You no longer can do the things that you used to do.
yeah.
And so this is what I believe the entire journey of our physical experiences, to get to a point in your life to only realize nothing was ever in your control to start with.
And
So
we're the only species that try to control it, right?
yeah, so everything
Look,
that you
look at
think you're
dogs.
controlling, everything that you think you're controlling, you're actually not. It's just
Wow.
subconsciously. Yeah, it's subconscious. It's subconsciously programmed in you, and you are just picking what you think is conscious, but it's actually subconscious.
I mean, everybody that follows me on LinkedIn knows I adore dogs, and they will teach you so much if you watch a dog.
I agree. I have a dog too.
Yeah, and yeah. So, a dog as it ages doesn't look at another dog and the puppy and think, oh, I used to be that. God, I'm so old now. I put weight on
Yeah,
and I can't do this and I'm not as attractive as I used to be. There's no sense of self there. There's no narrative in
yeah,
the dog's head. The dog doesn't regret that it's old and it can't jump as high as it
yeah,
could anymore. It can't run as fast as it could anymore. It's so aligned with the present moment that it
yeah,
is as it is,
yeah. Agree.
just as it is. And it's a human mind that complicates all this, right? It's a human
Agree.
mind that tries to control and layer things on and resist and fight. It's very normal. It's very natural. It's the
Yeah,
most normal, natural thing we do, probably. But
agree.
even knowing that there's ways you can help yourself just a little bit is big.
And experience that happiness that you postponed 30 years later to now, because only God knows whether you're going to get to the 30 years later.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, let's see. Again, I'm gonna see. I'm like so curious. Whatever happened to our life? Um,
Well, we had this demo. We should. I guess we should wrap it up. We can't. We've probably been talking
yes, we
about an
can
hour.
wrap it up. And it's
I've got a feeling
definitely,
it didn't stream, but here we go.
I'm sure this is live somewhere, but anyway. Um,
It's live in some parallel universe somewhere.
parallel universe. That's so
Someone's
true.
tuned in.
The aliens are watching us.
Yeah,
So anyway, I'm going to end this live. We can continue to chat, but I'm going to end this live. It was great to have you, Steve. And if this did not go live, we'll definitely do a second one.
for
But
sure.
I hope any of you who are listening enjoyed this. And if this did not go live, we can take bits and pieces of it and stream it on to LinkedIn later.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording as well.